The moment the plane tires touched the runway, my phone buzzed with a message so familiar in tone it barely needed a name attached. "You are not welcome in our 5-star hotel." That was it. No greeting, no explanation. Just banishment typed out like a commandment from someone who believed they still had authority over me. My father had sent that text exactly 3 minutes after my flight landed in Charleston. I stared at the words glowing on my screen, the blue light reflecting in my sunglasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years when dealing with the Harrington family amusement. He thought he was warning a disgraced daughter away from their luxury weekend retreat. He thought he could shame me into disappearing again the way he always had. He had no idea he was texting the woman who controlled the deed to the very building he claimed I wasn't welcome in. My smile spread slowly quiet and razor-sharp. I picked up my phone, dialed a private number, and when the security chief answered, I said calmly, "Revoke the Harrington family's VIP access, effective immediately. Their keycards would stop working at midnight. My name is Elena Brooks, and my family has no idea who I became after they threw me away." The automatic doors of the Sapphire Crown Hotel slid open, with a soft rush of chilled air, scented with eucalyptus and white tea. My heels clicked against the marble, echoing beneath chandeliers shaped like cascading waterfalls. Everywhere I looked, guests were floating around in tailored suits and glittering evening gowns, carrying champagne flutes and entitlement in equal measure. I gripped the handle of my suitcase, adjusting the beige trench coat I had chosen, deliberately understated in color, but unmistakably expensive in its stitching. I wasn't dressed like the CEO of Crestline Holdings, the private equity firm quietly acquiring coastal luxury properties across the country. Today, I was dressed like the girl my family expected to see, worn down, unremarkable, someone easy to dismiss. The Harringtons only ever recognized loud wealth logos plastered across handbags, shoes that screamed their price tags, jewelry that sparkled too aggressively to be real. They never understood that real money whispers. The moment I stepped deeper into the lobby, a massive banner came into view draped above the central fountain. "Congratulations on 30 years, Richard and Patrice Harrington." Of course, it wasn't enough for them to host an anniversary celebration. They needed the world to stop and applaud. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my father. "Don't make a scene, Elena. Your sister is here with her husband's family. If you walk into this lobby, I'll have you removed for trespassing." I exhaled slowly, scanning the crowd until I found them. There was my mother, Patrice, dripping in gold sequins that glinted harshly under the chandelier lights. Her jewelry, fake, I knew was layered so thickly it weighed down her neck. She was laughing too loudly, hands fluttering like she was on a stage. My father, Richard, stood beside her wearing a tuxedo, a size too small, the buttons straining across his midsection. He held a glass of bourbon like it was an extension of his authority. And then there was my sister, Sienna, the chosen one, the golden child. She was dressed in a pale rose gown, her hair falling in perfect waves, as she leaned into her husband Hudson, a man whose arrogance preceded him through every room he entered. Their smiles were polished, their laughter rehearsed. I took a breath and headed toward the front desk. I didn't make it far. The moment my mother spotted me, her expression collapsed, shock, then panic, then sheer fury tightening her features. She excused herself from the group with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and marched toward me, her heels stabbing into the marble like threats. She blocked my path before I could reach the reception desk. "What do you think you're doing here?" she hissed. "Did you not get your father's message?" "Hello, Mother," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "Nice to see you. Don't you dare use that tone with me." She darted a look around, desperate to see if anyone was watching. "You look like a stray dog. Look at you, no husband, no career anyone can name, dragging that old suitcase around like a vagabond." I let her talk. She'd always mistaken cruelty for control. "We are hosting Hudson's parents tonight," she continued. "People with actual class. I will not have you ruin this evening." I studied her face, the same face that had turned cold the day I left home at 19. When I refused to marry the older businessman my father owed money to, they had locked me out. Not metaphorically, literally. My clothes were thrown on the lawn, my keycard disabled, my phone cut off. They said I was ungrateful, a burden, a failure. "I'm just here to check in," I said calmly. Her laugh exploded sharp and barking. "Check in. A standard room here costs more than you make in a month freelancing or whatever it is you pretend to do. You have no business being in a 5-star hotel." She snapped her fingers at a security guard walking by. "You there? Remove this woman from the premises. She's disturbing the guests." The guard, Andre, was someone I personally hired after the acquisition 3 months ago. He recognized me instantly. His posture stiffened, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "is there an issue?" "The issue," my mother snapped, "is that she's trespassing. Do your job." Before Andre could respond, a smug voice cut through the lobby. "Well, well, if it isn't the runaway sister." Hudson approached, his glass of scotch sloshing in his hand, his eyes scanning me with theatrical disappointment. Behind him, Sienna lifted her phone, already recording. Of course. Sienna smiled sweetly at the camera. "This is Elena," she narrated to her online followers. "The one who abandoned the family, the one who always causes drama." Hudson reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip. He peeled off $500 bills and dropped them deliberately onto the marble at my feet. The bills floated down like insults dressed as generosity. "There," he said, "go find a motel that fits your budget, somewhere with peeling wallpaper and hourly rates." Sienna giggled behind her phone. "Pick it up, Elena. It's more than you're worth." My mother crossed her arms. "You heard him. Take it and get out." I looked down at the money. 10 years ago, I might have taken it. Today, I stepped over it, my heel pressing Ben Franklin's face into the floor. "I'm not going anywhere." My mother's face flushed purple. "Andre, remove her now." Andre stepped forward, torn between orders and common sense. I didn't move, because I didn't need to. From the corner of my eye, I saw him, the general manager, Mr. Archer, moving quickly from the executive office hallway. His expression tightened the second he saw me. Not with anger, with fear. "Here comes management," my mother said smugly. "You're finished." Archer stopped in front of us, ignoring everyone but me. He leaned in just enough to whisper, "Ms. Brooks, we didn't expect you until tomorrow." "Should I initiate the protocol?" I let the words hang for a moment. My mother straightened, triumphant. Hudson smirked. Sienna zoomed in, ready to capture my humiliation. "Not yet," I whispered to Archer. "Just upgrade me to the presidential suite and revoke the Harrington family's keycards at midnight." Archer nodded subtly. "Yes, ma'am." I turned my back on the three of them, their frozen expressions a perfect portrait of ignorance. "Have a lovely evening," I said over my shoulder. Their laughter followed me as I walked away. But their world had already shifted. They just didn't know it yet. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, releasing a breath of cold, perfumed air that swept over me as I stepped into the private corridor leading to the Helios Tower guest floors. Midnight glittered across the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, but my pulse was louder than the city lights. I walked with measured steps, my heels tapping a deliberate rhythm, but inside the old ache burned like a bruise pressed too many times. Coming back here into the world my family worshipped and weaponized felt like forcing myself into a scar that had never fully healed. I paused at the corner, watching the hallway camera overhead pivot slightly. Mr. Archer must have already updated the staff log. My face, my identity, my authority restored to the system the moment he verified my name. The moment he realized exactly who the Harrington family had just insulted. The owner. A title I'd earned with sleepless years and brutal negotiations not borrowed through someone else's bank account. I inhaled once, steadying myself, then moved toward the suite reserved for VIP family guests. According to the system feed on my phone, my parents' group had returned from the bar 5 minutes ago, reeking of their own self-importance, dragging the same tired arrogance that used to fill every room of our childhood home. Before reaching the suite, I stopped at a decorative alcove. its glass shelves reflecting the soft amber glow of recessed lighting. I caught my reflection, a woman in a beige coat, simple makeup hair tied loosely back. Not glamorous, not intimidating, almost deliberately plain. My disguise for the evening. The irony of how invisible wealth could be amused me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Don't push us, Elena. We are still your family." I exhaled, not with fear, but with a bitter laugh. That number belonged to my mother's secondary phone, the one she used when she didn't want my father tracking her purchases. Another buzz. "If you embarrass us tonight, you'll regret it." There it was. Not concern, not remorse. Threat. I typed a single word. Noted. I locked the screen and slipped the phone into my coat, then continued toward the suite. The corridor curved slightly, directing guests toward the lounge area, where soft jazz floated through the speakers. The scent of lemongrass and smoked cedar drifted from a decorative diffuser, masking the undertone of spilled champagne and luxury fatigue left by guests who believed everything in the world existed to cater to them. I reached the suite door. The Harrington suite. The nameplate gleamed under the soft lighting polished earlier that day for them, for people who believed tarnish only existed on metal, not in behavior. I lifted my hand and knocked once. The door flew open. My sister's face appeared, first heated, annoyed pupils, slightly dilated from alcohol. Harper looked exactly as I remembered her, at 24, glamorous but fragile, loud but hollow, her beauty dimming under the weight of her own entitlement. The moment she recognized me, her expression twisted into disbelief, then fury. "What are you doing on this floor?" she demanded, gripping the edge of the door as though she wanted to slam it into my face. "This level is for VIPs only." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm aware," she scoffed. "Well, since when do you qualify?" Before I could answer, another voice drifted into view. "Is someone bothering you, sweetheart Harley?" The future son-in-law my parents adored appeared behind her drink in hand, tuxedo loosened, as if he had already declared himself the lord of the hotel. He leaned against the doorframe, eyes dragging over me with dismissive amusement. Harper smirked and crossed her arms. "She thinks she can walk around the Helios Tower like she belongs here." Harley took a slow sip of his whiskey. "Relax, babe. She probably just got lost looking for the budget rooms." He turned to me. "Staff hallway is 2 floors down. Try not to scuff the carpet." The old Elena might have apologized, might have lowered her gaze, might have swallowed the humiliation because she believed she deserved it. Not anymore. "I'm not lost," I said calmly. Harper glared. "Then what do you want? I need to speak with Mom and Dad." She burst out laughing. "Oh, you're serious. You're not allowed in here." "Dad said so." "Dad also says a lot of things that aren't true," I replied. Her face reddened instantly. "Get out before I call security." "You should," I said softly. "They're expecting my call anyway." Confusion flickered across her expression, but before she could ask, a familiar voice boomed from inside the suite. "Who is at the door, Harper? What is taking so long?" My father stepped into view, adjusting his cufflinks, wearing a navy suit that tried too hard to shape him into the man he wished he still was. He looked at me and froze. His jaw tightened. The contempt in his eyes sharpened like a knife. "Elena," he said slowly, "I told you to stay in the lobby." "No," I corrected. "You texted me that I wasn't welcome in your 5-star hotel." My mother appeared beside him, wrapped in a sequined gown that sparkled under the chandelier light. She clutched a champagne flute in one hand and disappointment in the other. "What part of stay away did you not understand?" she hissed. "You look like a stray who stumbled into the wrong zip code." Harley snickered. Harper smirked. My mother lifted her chin with a kind of superiority only bankruptcy could cure. "Leave my father ordered, before we decide to make it public." The threat hung between us like cheap perfume, overpowering but hollow. I took a step forward. "You don't have the authority to remove me." His eyes flared. "This is my hotel for the weekend, Elena. My celebration. You always ruin things. Always. Even now." "This isn't your hotel," I said quietly. "And it hasn't been for a long time." He barked a laugh. What are you talking about? The Harrington family has been VIP here for decades. That was before your credit imploded, I replied. Before your name became a liability. He stepped closer, finger pointed at my face. You don't talk to me like that. I tilted my head, then maybe listen better. The hallway fell into silence. Then Harper broke it with a gleeful scoff. You know what, this is pathetic. She reached into her clutch. Here. She pulled out her wallet, extracted 5 crisp $100 bills, and shoved them toward me. Take this, she sneered. Buy yourself dinner or therapy, or maybe a personality, and then get out of this luxury hotel. Harley laughed loudly. My mother looked proud. My father nodded in approval as though this humiliation was a family bonding exercise. The bills fluttered in my direction and fell at my feet. I didn't look down. I didn't blink. Instead, I calmly lifted my phone and dialed. A hush rippled through the hallway. Who are you calling? My father demanded. I lifted the phone to my ear. Security, I said. Revoke the Harrington family's VIP access. Effective immediately. My mother paled. You wouldn't. My father stepped forward. Elena, stop this nonsense. I continued speaking into the phone. Yes, all access, all key cards, midnight activation. Harper stared at me, disbelief breaking into trembling outrage. You can't do that, she whispered. You don't have the power. I ended the call and looked each of them in the eyes. I do. Harley opened his mouth to argue, but at that precise moment, an alert pinged on their suite door panel. A red light blinked twice. Their VIP status had already been flagged in the system. The look on their faces was priceless. My father pointed at me, handshaking. What did you do? I stepped back, allowing the corridor's ambient lighting to frame me in soft gold. What you told me to do, I said. Get out of this luxury hotel. I turned and began walking down the hall. Behind me, my sister's voice broke into a panicked scream. Mom, Dad, why did her phone override the suite system? My father answered with a hoarse whisper. She didn't override it. She commands it. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The elevator doors opened with a soft sigh, welcoming me into the quiet sanctuary reserved for owners and executives. As the doors slid shut, I heard my mother's final trembling question echo down the corridor. What exactly has she become? My reflection stared back at me in the polished elevator walls, calm, composed, untouchable. And for the first time in years, I whispered the truth aloud. Someone you shouldn't have thrown away. The elevator descended toward the private executive level, carrying me deeper into the empire I built, and further away from the family who never believed I could. But midnight was coming, and so was the reckoning. The city lights shimmered through the glass walls of the executive lounge as I stepped inside, my pulse still thrumming from the confrontation upstairs. The room was quiet, dimly lit, and wrapped in the scent of sandalwood, an intentional design to contrast the chaos of the main floors. Here time slowed. Here the air felt breathable. I crossed the lounge with my shoulders squared, forcing myself into the present moment, into the reality I had created far from the Harringtons' orbit. But as I reached the private bar and poured myself a glass of cold, sparkling water, the weight of old memories tugged at me like gravity. I leaned one hand against the marble counter and exhaled slowly. It didn't matter how much success I built, how many properties I acquired, or how many rooms in this skyscraper bore my signature, the ghosts still knew my name. The elevator chimed softly behind me. I turned. Mr. Archer entered, carrying a silver tablet and wearing a look that balanced apology duty and something like respect. Ms. Brooks, he said, dipping his head. I came as soon as security confirmed your order. I nodded. Good. They won't go quietly. No, he agreed. Families like the Harringtons never do. He placed the tablet on the bar between us. I thought you would want to see the activity log for the suite. I hesitated, then reached for the screen. My fingers brushed over the digital entries, room service charges, spa appointments, declined credit authorizations, an alarming number of complimentary upgrades given by managers who had no authority to offer them. I swallowed tightly. "How long has this been going on?" Mr. Archer clasped his hands gently. 4, perhaps 5 months. The previous regional director allowed them significant flexibility due to their reputation. By the time I arrived, it was already a pattern. A quiet bitterness leaked into his tone. "I apologize, Ms. Brooks. Had I realized the true connection between you and the family sooner, I would have intervened earlier." "You didn't know," I said, setting the tablet down. "My last name isn't Harrington. I legally changed it at 23. He paused. "Understandable." Understandable. That word clung to the air. I walked toward the panoramic window overlooking the skyline. The night was clear and the lights painted the city in constellations. My reflection hovered faintly in the glass, a silhouette draped in quiet fury. "I knew they were careless," I murmured. "But this is theft." "Not ignorance," Mr. Archer said softly. "Entitlement." I looked over my shoulder at him, meeting his gaze. "Prepare a complete financial report," I said. "Every comped service, every unpaid transaction, every override." He nodded. "And the gala booking they requested," he asked. "Shall I decline it?" My jaw tightened. "Not yet." "Not yet," he repeated, as though testing the shape of the words. I turned fully toward him. "They think they're untouchable. They think the world rearranges itself around them. If we cancel tonight, they'll spin a story where they're the victims. But if we let them continue, if we let them reach the edge of their own downfall, they'll be the authors of their demise." Mr. Archer absorbed this quietly, then straightened. "I'll ensure all staff know to treat you as an anonymous executive guest. No connection to the suite upstairs." "Good. And may I ask—" He hesitated, lowering his voice. "What triggered tonight's escalation?" I stared past him toward the elevator, imagining Harper's manicured hand shoving bills into my face, the way my mother's expression twisted with ridicule the smug curl of my father's lip. "What triggered it?" I repeated softly. "They threw money at me." He blinked. "Money, $500, I said, as if I were an inconvenience they could pay to disappear. Mr. Archer's expression darkened. "I wasn't aware. My deepest apologies." I waved a hand. "They don't deserve your apologies, Mr. Archer. They deserve the consequences they've been borrowing against for years." A moment passed. Then he cleared his throat. "Security will revoke their access at midnight sharp. Shall we escort them off the property immediately after?" "No," I said. "Let them stay. Let them enjoy the illusion a little longer. They love the Helios Tower so much. They should experience every corner of it." His brows lifted slightly, but he didn't question me. I finished my water, set the glass aside, and walked toward the hallway leading to the private penthouse elevator. But Mr. Archer called after me. "Ms. Brooks," he said carefully, "may I offer a small piece of unsolicited advice?" I stopped. "Keep your phone close tonight," he said. "The Harringtons do not seem like people who accept boundaries gracefully." My lips twitched in acknowledgement. "They don't." He gave a final nod and retreated from the lounge, leaving me in the quiet hum of the executive floor. I entered the elevator and pressed the keycard panel. The doors closed with a whisper, and the lift began its ascent to the owner's level, an entire floor hidden from guests, contractors, even most staff. 30 floors above the noise, the air shifted, calmer, thinner, uncluttered by the world below. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into the private foyer, an elegant expanse of marble soft lighting and curated art pieces that belonged to no one but me. For a moment I simply stood there staring at the quiet luxury I had spent years building stone by stone, contract by contract, a far cry from the home I grew up in. I walked through the foyer and into the penthouse suite, the door sliding shut behind me with a hushed seal. The air smelled of lavender and cool linen. White curtains billowed slightly from the soft hidden vents. The city stretched beneath me like a map of possibilities. But even with all this space, all this comfort, I felt the ghost of a smaller room, The one where I'd spent my teenage nights listening to my mother criticize my existence through the walls. I moved toward the living room, where a sleek tablet rested on the coffee table. I picked it up and unlocked the hotel's internal security feed. Camera views filled the screen, one for each major area of the hotel: lobby, lounges, restaurants, elevators, and the Harrington suite. I tapped it. The screen expanded. My father was pacing, one hand pressed to his temple. My mother was sitting on the bed, clutching her phone, undoubtedly sending texts to relatives about how I had betrayed the family. Harper was pointing aggressively at the door panel, showing Harley how the red alert meant something was wrong. They looked frantic, chaotic, exactly as they had always made me feel. I sank onto the couch, the leather cool against my skin, and watched them argue. For the first time, I didn't feel pulled into their storm. I was the storm. A knock sounded. I set the tablet aside and walked to the door. When I opened it, a server stood there with a small tray. "Your evening tea, Ms. Brooks." "Thank you." He bowed and retreated. I carried the tray inside, letting the soothing aroma of chamomile fill the room. But just as I took the first sip, my tablet buzzed. Security alert. Unauthorized attempt to access owner floor. Elevator call from VIP suite. I let out a slow breath. Of course they would try. Of course they would push. Of course they believed they could talk or threaten their way into a space they didn't belong. I set the teacup down and walked to the window again, watching the city pulse beneath me. They were climbing toward their downfall step by step, unaware that the elevator they were calling would never arrive. Not for them, not tonight, not ever again. Another notification blinked on the tablet. 12:00 a.m. Keycard access revoked. A small smile found my lips, soft but sharp. Midnight. The beginning of the end. I sat back on the couch, crossing my legs, and pressed play on the security feed as the Harrington family discovered that the world they thought they controlled had quietly, permanently slipped out of their hands. The grandfather clock in the Helios Tower lobby struck midnight with a deep, resonant chime that vibrated through the marble floors, echoing up into the vaulted ceilings. It was a sound that usually signaled elegance and luxury. Tonight it signaled something else entirely. The end of the Harringtons' reign. I watched the security feed from the owner's penthouse legs folded beneath me on the velvet chaise, a cup of cooling chamomile tea forgotten on the side table. My eyes were fixed on the screen as the family I once shared a last name with stumbled into the lobby, unaware that the world as they knew it had just collapsed under their feet. The camera angle caught everything. Harper's two high heels clicking drunkenly against the marble. Harley's arm wrapped lazily around her waist, my mother fanning herself aggressively with a folded event program, and my father muttering to himself like the walls were closing in. They looked exhausted, entitled, and oblivious, exactly how I remembered them. I tapped the screen, zooming in as they approached the private elevator bank reserved for VIP suites. My heart beat in a cold, steady rhythm. Harper shoved her keycard at the reader, chin lifted with the arrogance she'd worn since childhood. Nothing happened. The light blinked red. "Ugh, what is wrong with this stupid thing?" she snapped. Harley rolled his eyes and took her card. "Move. You never swipe it right." He tried. Red light. He swiped again, harder. Red light, sharp and unforgiving. My father stepped forward, waving them aside. "Give me that," he barked. "The system's been glitching all week. Probably the incompetent staff." He pressed his gold card against the reader. Red light. Beep. "No," he muttered. No, this is ridiculous." He swiped again, then again, his motions becoming frantic. His face reddened, sweat glistening at his temples. My mother tried hers, next jaw-clenched, lips thin. Red light. "That's impossible," she hissed. "This hotel knows who we are." Harper exploded first. "What the hell is going on? Why is nothing working?" Her voice echoed sharply through the empty lobby, bouncing off marble and gilded panels. Harley let out a sigh so dramatic it belonged on a stage. "This is ridiculous. Are we seriously locked out?" They all turned in unison toward the night manager's desk like a pack of irritated wolves. The night manager, a young woman named Jasmine, didn't flinch as my father stormed toward her. "Excuse me," he snapped, slamming his hand down on the polished counter. "Our key cards aren't working. Fix them immediately." Jasmine typed calmly, her face a mask of professional serenity. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington," she said. "According to the system, your VIP access was revoked at midnight." My father blinked, stunned. "Revoked? What do you mean revoked? By whom? By the owner, sir?" The silence that followed was electric. I leaned closer to the screen, unable to stop the small, sharp smile tugging at my lips. My mother gasped, one manicured hand flying to her chest. "The owner? Why on earth would the owner revoke our access?" Jasmine kept her voice even. "I can't speak to that, ma'am, but your suite privileges are no longer active." Harper laughed a high, shrill sound. "That's ridiculous. Do you know who we are?" "We've been coming to this hotel since before you were born." Jasmine only repeated, "Your access has been revoked." My father pinched the bridge of his nose. "Fine then, run the card again. You probably made a mistake." "We've already run it 3 times, Jasmine said. "It was declined each time." The camera caught the exact moment Harley stiffened, his eyes narrowing like a predator scenting weakness. "What do you mean, declined?" he demanded. "What exactly is the outstanding balance?" Jasmine checked the screen. $250,000. Harper let out a strangled sound. My father looked like someone had sucker punched him. My mother whispered, "No, that can't be right. There must be a technical error." Jasmine shook her head. "The charges span the last 6 months. They were previously covered by complimentary credits, but those have been revoked as well." "Revoked," Harper repeated, her voice cracking. "Why is everything revoked?" Harley stepped closer to my father, his eyes sharp with contempt. "You told me this suite was comped. You said the hotel was covering everything for the anniversary." It was my father shot back. "It's all part of our legacy partnership." "There is no legacy partnership on record," Jasmine corrected softly. "It expired 5 years ago." Harley's lip curled. "So you lied to me." My father's face twisted. "It's a misunderstanding." "Oh, it's definitely a misunderstanding," Harley muttered. "The misunderstanding is that I married into a family that can't even pay their own hotel bill." My mother's jaw dropped. "How dare you speak to us like that?" "You ungrateful," Harley cut her off. "I'm grateful for many things, Sylvia, but footing a $250,000 hotel bill is not one of them." He pulled out his titanium card and slapped it onto the counter. "Here," he barked. "Just charge everything to this." Jasmine accepted it carefully and ran it through the system. Approved. Harley grabbed the new keycards Jasmine handed him and tossed 2 at my father's feet. "There, I paid your tab. Don't make a habit of it." My father bent to pick up the cards, humiliation etched across his face. My mother's fury turned into trembling outrage. Harper looked like she'd been slapped. And Harley? He strutted toward the elevator, victorious. Except the elevator didn't move. I tapped the intercom button on my control tablet. A direct audio feed connected to the elevator camera, allowing one-way communication. "Enjoy the room," I said quietly into the microphone. "While you can." Harper jolted upright. "Who said that?" My father stared directly into the elevator camera. "Elena," I didn't respond. I simply turned off the feed. Back in the penthouse, I set the tablet aside, my breath steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. It was almost frightening how calm I felt watching their world collapse. Almost. I stood stretching the stiffness from my shoulders when another alert popped on the tablet. Unauthorized request, ballroom booking approval, Harrington family. The request file loaded automatically. Proposed event. The Harrington Future Fund Investment Gala. My stomach tightened. My father was trying to host another opportunity event. But the financial documents attached told the real story, falsified projections. Non-existent properties listed as secured assets. Misleading investor guarantees. 0 legal registrations. It wasn't just sloppy. It was criminal. Exactly like the schemes he'd tried to involve me in before I left. I scrolled deeper into the file and saw the guest list. VIP investors, wealthy business owners, international visitors, people who trusted the Harrington name, people they planned to deceive. A fire sparked in my chest. They weren't just stealing from the hotel, they were planning to use my ballroom to commit fraud. I closed the file and stood in the center of the suite, breathing slow and deep. A familiar voice whispered through the back of my mind, "Don't make trouble, Elena. You're lucky we let you stay. Smile and look pretty while the adults handle real business." But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was the adult, the owner, the one with the power to end this before it destroyed more lives. My phone buzzed with a new notification. Suite access attempt. Blocked location owner level elevator. I walked toward the elevator, not with fear but with a cold, steady purpose. They wanted to climb. They wanted to push. They wanted access to a world they didn't earn and didn't deserve. Let them try harder. Let them pound on the doors. Let them scream my name. Because midnight had come and gone, and I was finally done being their silent daughter. I pressed the elevator button, stepping inside as the doors split open. They slid shut behind me with a decisive finality. Tonight, I wasn't running from my family. Tonight I was running straight toward the truth, toward justice, toward the reckoning that had been delayed far too long. The next morning, the sun rose over the city in a pale sheet of gold, turning the skyline into a field of glass and fire. I stood at the window of the penthouse, watching the light spill across the towers below, letting the quiet wash over me. It was the kind of morning that should have felt calm, but calm was a foreign luxury to someone who grew up under the Harrington name. My tea sat untouched on the table. My mind was already 5 steps ahead, already anticipating the storm brewing below. Eventually, the hotel's daily rhythm began its slow hum, housekeepers pushing linen carts, chefs prepping breakfast service attendants, straightening suits and ties as they began their shifts. The Helios Tower woke like a living organism, one I owned, one I controlled, one my family had tried to leech off of without ever understanding the cost. I turned away from the window and tapped the security tablet resting on the sofa. The feed for the VIP dining room opened instantly. Staff were setting fresh arrangements of orchids on each table, draping pristine white cloths, polishing silver. Guests were beginning to trickle in. And then, like a storm cloud blotting out the sun, the Harrington family arrived. My father wore an expression carved from stone, the kind he used when he wanted the world to believe he was in control. My mother hid behind oversized sunglasses, though the dark circles beneath her eyes showed even through the tinted lenses. Harper trudged behind them, her face puffy with sleep and last night's humiliation. Harley kept a slight distance, scrolling on his phone, with the indifference of a man annoyed to be awake before noon. I zoomed in. They didn't look victorious anymore. They looked unsettled, unbalanced. One hit away from collapse. Perfect. I left the penthouse and took the service elevator down to the lounge hallway, slipping quietly into the VIP dining room through the side entrance, unseen by the family, unnoticed by the guests. I blended into the room with the ease of someone who had learned long ago how to make herself invisible when it mattered. I moved toward the buffet, reaching for a small plate of fruit standing only a few feet from the table where my parents had just seated themselves. My mother noticed first. Her head snapped up, sunglasses sliding down her nose. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "You," she spat under her breath as she pushed her chair back violently. She rose so sharply that the table shook, silverware rattling. Guests turned, conversations halted. She stormed toward me, anger radiating off her like heat. "What are you doing in here?" she hissed. "This area is for paying guests." I kept my tone even. "I am a paying guest," she scoffed. "With what pity spare change? You embarrassed us last night. Isn't that enough leave before someone sees you?" "Someone already has," I murmured. She ignored the warning, or maybe she didn't understand it. She grabbed my wrist, squeezing hard. "You're ruining everything. Go eat in the lobby." My plate tilted, fruit wobbling on the porcelain. I didn't pull away. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. But then she did something that made the entire room freeze. She slapped the plate out of my hand. The ceramic shattered on the marble floor with a sharp, ringing crack, scattering blueberries like spilled ink. A few drops splashed onto my shoes and hem of my trousers. Gasps echoed across the dining room. My mother straightened her spine chin high. "Clean that up," she said coldly. "Better yet, leave before I call security myself." I bent slowly, retrieving a piece of the broken plate, not because I felt small, but because I wanted to remember this moment exactly as it happened. I rose, meeting her eyes. "You seem stressed," I said. She blinked. "What is it, because your credit cards were declined last night?" The words landed like a dropped match in a room full of gasoline. A few guests choked on their coffee. My father stiffened so violently his chair scraped backward. "What did you just say?" my mother whispered. I spoke louder. "Your cards were declined. All of them, even Dad's. You couldn't pay for your suite. If Harley hadn't stepped in, you'd be sleeping in the lobby." Her face bleached white. "You don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Our finances are none of your concern. Apparently they're the hotel's concern," I replied, voice cool as marble. "Since you owe them more than $250,000. "Stop," my father growled, rising halfway from his seat. "You don't speak to your mother like—" But he didn't finish, because Harley had finally looked up. He wasn't laughing anymore. His gaze drifted to my wrist and froze. The watch, vintage, rare, a collector's masterpiece known only to those with real wealth. His eyes widened. Shock, recognition, fear. He stood slowly each second, revealing a deeper understanding. "Who are you?" he mouthed silently. I didn't answer. Instead, I set the piece of broken ceramic on their table and turned to leave. The silence that followed me was suffocating. I had nearly reached the exit when a shrill scream bounced through the dining room. "Excuse me?" A guest's voice, not directed at me but toward a far corner of the room. I turned. A young server, barely 18, maybe 19, stood with trembling hands holding a tray of coffee. The older gentleman who had shouted leaned forward in his chair, face red. "I asked for soy milk," he barked. "Is that too much to understand?" The girl stuttered an apology, but the man threw his napkin at her. My stomach twisted. This hotel had been my sanctuary since I started rebuilding my life. Its staff were my second family, the only family that had shown me unconditional support. But before I could intervene, Jasmine, the night manager from last night, stepped between them. "Sir," she said calmly, "that's enough." The guest snarled. "Do you know who I am?" "No," she said. "And it doesn't matter. You don't speak to my staff like that." He sputtered, outraged, but Jasmine held firm. Watching her defend someone who couldn't defend themselves made something settle inside me. This was the hotel I'd built. This was the leadership I wanted. This was the standard. I exited the dining room with a steadier heart, but the moment I stepped into the main corridor, my phone buzzed violently in my hand. A text notification lit the screen. "Urgent financial irregularities found. You need to see this." "Archer." My pulse quickened. I hurried toward the executive elevator and rode it down to the administrative floor. Archer was waiting for me outside the finance office. He looked grim. "What did you find?" I asked. He motioned toward the glass-walled conference room. "It's worse than we thought." I followed him inside. Two accountants sat with laptops open, spreadsheets spread across the table. Lines of red highlighted charges filled every screen. Archer handed me a printed report. My stomach dropped as I scanned the numbers. Room charges, spa bills, multiple 6-course dining experiences, private drivers, unlimited bar tabs, event pre-bookings, all comped, all unpaid, all fraudulent. "How long?" I whispered. "Over a year," Archer replied. "The prior management kept covering it up, expecting the Harringtons to repay eventually." And they never did. No, they kept exploiting the system. And then yesterday, they requested something else. He handed me a separate file, a gala contract. Not just any gala, a fundraising event. The Harrington Legacy Investment Evening. The brochure looked professional, elegant, glossy. But the numbers inside told a different story. Projected returns fictional, listed assets non-existent, investor guarantees illegal. "This is a scam," I whispered. Archer nodded. "Your father submitted the paperwork to host it tonight." I dropped the file onto the table, the pages scattering like broken glass. "He wants to use my hotel to commit fraud." "Yes," Archer said quietly. The accountants exchanged uneasy glances. "And you know what happens," he added, "if investors lose money under our roof." "Lawsuits," I murmured. "Regulatory investigations, reputational damage. We could lose our license to operate." I pressed my palms against the cool glass table, grounding myself. This wasn't just personal anymore, it was criminal, and it was on the edge of unfolding inside my building. "What do you want to do?" Archer asked. I straightened, spine pulling taut like steel. "We proceed," I said. "Let him set the stage. Let him gather the investors. Let him reveal his plan." Archer studied my face. And then I met his eyes, unwavering. "We expose him." His breath caught for a moment, whether in fear or admiration I couldn't tell. He nodded once. "Then we finish the preparations," he said. "I'll be there," I replied. "But not as myself." His eyebrows lifted. I smiled, not soft this time, but cold and certain. "As far as he's concerned," I murmured, "I stopped being part of the Harrington family years ago." I gathered the papers, tucking them beneath my arm, and walked toward the door. Behind me, Archer spoke one last time. "Ms. Brooks, this is justice overdue." As I stepped into the hallway, I whispered to myself, "It's not justice." My fingers tightened around the file. "It's the truth." And tonight the truth would finally be louder than the Harrington name. The turquoise water of the Helios Tower rooftop pool sparkled beneath the midday sun, casting bright ripples of light across the ivory stone tiles. But even from a distance, the serenity of the scene was shattered by the sound of my sister's voice, sharp grating, dripping with the kind of entitlement that had poisoned every room she ever walked into. I had come up here to speak with the events manager to finalize the quiet preparations for tonight's reveal, but the moment I stepped onto the sun deck, I froze. Harper was standing beside a private cabana, hands on her hips, her expression twisted with irritation. In front of her, kneeling on the scorching tiles, was Mrs. Lively, a housekeeper who had worked in the Helios Tower for over 2 decades. A woman whose kindness was as much part of this hotel as the marble floors and skyline views. She was on her knees, scrubbing sunscreen that Harper had very clearly thrown on the ground herself. My jaw clenched. Harper tapped her foot impatiently, sunglasses perched on her head like a crooked crown. I said, "Get all of it." "Why is that so hard to understand?" she snapped. "You people are paid to clean." "So clean." Mrs. Lively winced, shifting her weight with obvious pain in her knees. "Miss, the mop would be more efficient." "I just need Harper cut her off. No mop, I want it spotless. On your hands and knees, or I'm reporting you for insubordination." A couple of sunbathing guests looked up from their lounge chairs, frowning at the spectacle. Harper didn't care. She never cared. She only knew how to perform cruelty when she felt powerless, and after last night, after the revoked access and the humiliation, she was desperate to feel powerful again. Harley lounged in the cabana behind her, sipping a cocktail like the world existed for his amusement. He smirked as Mrs. Lively continued scrubbing. I felt heat rising in my chest, a fire made of every insult, every dismissal, every moment my family treated human beings like furniture. I stepped forward. "Stand up, Mrs. Lively." My voice carried across the deck, calm but firm enough to cut through the air like a blade. Mrs. Lively froze her shoulders, shaking slightly. She looked up at me with a mixture of relief and fear. "Miss Brooks, I don't want trouble." "You're not the one in trouble," I said softly. Harper turned, surprise flashing across her face before curdling into hostility. "Oh, great," she muttered. "You're here. Can't you go be dramatic somewhere else?" I ignored her. "Mrs. Lively," I said, keeping my tone steady, "please stand." Slowly, painfully, the older woman rose to her feet. Her hands trembled as she wiped her palms on her uniform. Harper scoffed. Excuse me, you do not get to interfere. This woman works for us. No, I replied. She works for the Helios Tower. She works for me. Harper blinked, confused. You don't be ridiculous. Her laughter was brittle hollow. You're just here to beg attention, she sneered, always so desperate to feel important. I stepped closer, placing myself directly between her and Mrs. Lively. You dropped that sunscreen bottle on purpose, Harper. So what, she snapped. People like her clean up after people like us. That's how it works. She should be grateful for the job. A sharp, icy calm settled over me. This woman has given 20 years of loyalty to this hotel, I said quietly. She has earned more respect than you will ever be capable of showing. Harper rolled her eyes. Save your speeches. You can't make me apologize. I can, I replied, and I will. I turned to Mrs. Lively. You're relieved for the day, with pay. Please report to the executive office tomorrow morning. Her eyes widened, tears welling at the edges. Miss, I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, I said. Go rest. As she walked away, shoulders trembling with emotion, Harper flipped her hair and marched up to me. What the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded. You don't run this place. I stepped closer, so close she had no choice but to look me in the eye. You assaulted a staff member, I said. You humiliated her. You abused your status. Harper scoffed. Oh, please. That's nothing. No, I said. It's everything. Before she could retort, she raised her hand and slapped me. The sound echoed across the pool deck. Hard enough that my face whipped to the side. Hard enough to split the inside of my lip. Gasps erupted behind me. Guest staff, even Harley, sat upright. Harper leaned in, her voice trembling with rage. Don't you ever try to embarrass me again? You are nothing. You always have been nothing. I lifted my hand slowly, touching the warm sting on my cheek. I didn't step back. I didn't cry. Instead, I straightened and looked directly into her eyes. You'll pay for that, I whispered. Something flickered in her expression. Uncertainty. Fear. She stepped back. What are you? I pulled out my phone, typed a single message to Archer and legal. Initiate staff protection protocol, file charges assault harassment, serve papers before dinner, add $50,000 damage penalty to their account. Harper's mouth fell open as the reality settled over her like a shadow. You wouldn't, she whispered. I lowered my phone. I already did. She screamed a shrill, wild sound and stormed off the deck, pushing past chairs, knocking over a small table, nearly tripping over her own rage. Harley rose halfway from his seat, watching her go, then slowly turned to look at me. He didn't speak, but his eyes said everything. Fear, recognition, understanding. The balance of power had shifted, and he knew it. I wiped a small smear of blood from my lip and took a steady breath. A pool attendant approached nervously. Miss Brooks. Should we alert more security? No, I said. Just continue as usual, because the more normal everything looked, the harder it would be for the Harringtons to realize how many traps they were walking into. I headed toward the service corridor, away from the stunned onlookers, and slipped into the quiet, shadowed hallway that led toward the archive rooms. Halfway down, I felt a hand clamp around my shoulder. My body reacted instantly, muscles tightening, breath catching. But when I turned, I found myself face to face with the last person I wanted to see. My father. He looked terrible, wrinkled suit, dark circles under his eyes, desperation bleeding through every line of his face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something rotten and animalistic. I've been looking everywhere for you, he hissed. We need to talk. I shrugged off his hand. We don't need to talk. Yes, we do, he snapped. You're going to give me $50,000. A humorless laugh escaped me. No, I'm not. His jaw twitched. Don't play stupid, Elena. I know you have money tucked away. You always hoarded everything, your scholarships, your savings, your inheritance. My inheritance, I cut in sharply. The inheritance you sold for a vacation, he glared. I need the money. The hotel is demanding a deposit for tonight's gala. If I don't pay, everything collapses. Then let it collapse, I said. His face turned purple. "You ungrateful brat! I raised you. You exploited me." He reeled back like the truth had struck him harder than Harper ever could. "You want me to fund a fraudulent gala," I said. "You want me to bankroll your crimes." "It's business," he spat. "It's illegal." His expression twisted. "Give me the money or what I challenged." He lifted his hand. A fist. Drawing back. For a split second the hallway blurred. I wasn't standing in the Helios Tower. I was 16 again, shrinking away from his rage. But before he could swing, a voice cut through the tension. "Marcus." Harley stepped into view from around the corner posture, rigid eyes burning with shock. "I wouldn't do that," he said quietly. My father froze. Harley looked at me not with contempt, not with arrogance, just realization. "You're not who they think you are," he said under his breath. "Are you?" The heat from my slapped cheek pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. I didn't answer. His next words were barely audible. "What exactly are you, Elena?" I stepped out of their reach, straightening my coat. "You'll find out," I said. Then I walked away, leaving the two men standing in the dim, narrow hallway, one seething, the other shaken. Upstairs, preparations for the Harrington Future Fund Gala had already begun. And tonight. The truth would walk into the ballroom with me. The royal suite door clicked shut behind me with a hollow, echoing sound as I stepped inside, my mother's command still ringing in my ears like a slap of its own. "If you want to stay in this hotel without me calling the police, you'll make yourself useful." The audacity would have been laughable if it weren't so familiarly cruel. Kesha No Harper was already standing on a pedestal in the center of the suite's living room, arms flung out dramatically, as if she were preparing for coronation rather than a family portrait. The long white gown she wore hugged her body in all the wrong ways, wrinkled along the seams, the beaded sleeves uneven, the zipper slightly undone at the back. She didn't notice any of it. She was too busy shouting at the lighting technician from the photography crew the hotel had brought up 15 minutes earlier. "Fix the spotlight," she snapped. "It makes my skin look sallow. And do something about the reflection from those windows. Honestly, does anyone here know what they're doing?" Her voice grated against the marble and glass walls. I stood quietly near the steamer waiting. Not because I was actually her assistant, God knew I wasn't, but because this role gave me access. And I needed access to the people, the objects, the things she thought were her treasures, things she never realized could expose her. Finally, she said, catching sight of me. "You're here. Took you long enough." I didn't respond. I plugged in the steamer, watching the small red light blink to life. "Fix my train first," Harper commanded. "It's dragging. I swear these designers don't know how to dress real women with actual curves." She didn't have curves. She had money, borrowed money, and the belief it could replace self-awareness. I walked toward the gown, letting the steam drift over the fabric. Hot mist curled against the silk, releasing the wrinkles almost instantly. As I worked, I noticed something on the velvet armchair beside the pedestal, a bright orange Hermes Birkin bag Harper had flaunted at every chance. She claimed Brad Harley had bought it for her in Paris, but even from a distance I knew. It was fake. I drifted closer under the pretense of adjusting the train. My fingers brushed the leather. Too thin, too glossy. The stitching was uneven, the hardware too reflective. Then I saw it, a shipping receipt sticking out from the interior pocket. I angled my body just right and slid my phone from my coat. Shielding it with my hand, I snapped 3 photos: the bag, the stitching, the counterfeit receipt. It wasn't much, but it was leverage. The kind of leverage that mattered when everything else went up in flames. "Are you done yet?" Harper snapped. I stepped back. Almost. Almost isn't good enough. She was staring at herself in the mirror, touching her cheek, smoothing her hair, obsessing over imperfections no one cared about. The pedestal she stood on wobbled slightly as she shifted her weight. "You know," she said, her voice thick with self-satisfaction, "you're actually lucky I let you help me. Most people would kill for this kind of access, to be close to people who matter." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. A sliding sound drew my attention to the balcony doors. They had opened silently, and Harley stepped inside his phone pressed to his ear. His face looked worn for the first time, not smug, not arrogant, just strained. His shoulders slumped as he moved deeper into the suite. I stepped around the back of the armchair and crouched, pretending to smooth the hem of Harper's gown. The curtains draped low enough that I could hide behind them if needed. Harley paced near the balcony railing close enough that I could hear every word. "Babe," he whispered into the phone. "You're not listening." "I can't talk long." His tone was urgent. Too urgent. My stomach tightened. "I told you the money is coming," he continued. "Tonight's the night. Marcus has the investors lined up like sheep. He thinks he's saving his legacy." Idiot. I froze. My blood went cold. But what about her? The woman on the phone must have asked. She's nothing, he said. Keisha won't know a thing. She thinks we're buying a house in Aspen. Jesus, she's gullible. He paused, checking his watch. "Once the funds hit the offshore account tomorrow morning, I'm out. First flight to Rio. Just you and me, babe." Every word carved into the room like a blade. "He doesn't suspect a thing," Harley murmured. "He thinks I'm the perfect husband. And Keisha, God, she thinks we're building a future. The future I'm building doesn't include any of them." I pressed my back against the armchair, steadying my breath. My pulse hammered against my ribcage, each beat a reminder of how fragile their house of cards truly was. Harley ended the call, slipped his phone into his pocket, and straightened. He didn't notice me hiding behind the curtain. He didn't recognize that his entire scheme had just been recorded in crystal-clear audio by the microphone attached to my security badge. I saved the file to the hotel cloud twice and emerged from my crouched position. Just in time. Water Harper screamed, stomping her foot. "Is anyone listening?" I said, "Water." I walked out calmly from the curtains. "Coming," I said, my voice smooth and steady, but inside something sharp and triumphant unfurled. Harley and my father were planning fraud on a catastrophic scale. Harley was cheating, stealing, planning to run, and Harper. She would be blindsided by the storm she helped create. But no one would see the lightning until it struck. I moved toward the dining table where a silver pitcher sat sweating on a tray. I poured water into a crystal glass, set it on a small golden tray, and turned only to freeze again. My dress. The dress I had laid out earlier for the gala. The dress I'd chosen, carefully simple but elegant, was shredded across the bed. Silk torn into wild ribbons, straps cut, bodice slashed. Harper stood in the doorway of the bedroom holding a pair of scissors. "Oh," she said airily, "did you leave that there?" It looked so cheap. "I thought you were planning to embarrass us again." My throat tightened. She tilted the scissors with a smirk. "Oops." I walked toward the bed slowly, picked up a strip of silk between my fingers. Let it fall. It was deliberate. It was calculated. It was meant to break something inside me. But the thing she wanted to break wasn't there anymore. She waited for the tears. She waited for the anger. She waited for the reaction she could weaponize. Instead, I smiled gently. "You're right," I said. "This dress wasn't good enough." She frowned. "Excuse me, it didn't fit the occasion." Then I walked past her and picked up the suite phone. Within seconds, the Helios Towers Couture Boutique answered. "This is Elena," I said. "I need the entire Fall Haute Couture collection brought to the presidential suite, within 10 minutes, and bring the vault diamonds." The woman on the other end gasped softly. "Right away, Ms. Brooks." I hung up and turned back to Harper. She looked confused, disoriented, as if she had swung a bat only to realize she had hit steel instead of glass. "Poor thing," she muttered. "You think you can pretend to be someone important?" "No," I said softly, stepping closer. "I don't have to pretend." There was no heat in my tone, just truth. She blinked, unsettled. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. 3 stylists rushed in, wheeling racks of shimmering gowns. Silk, velvet, hand-stitched crystals. A wardrobe worth more than the Harrington family's entire estate. The stylists bowed slightly. "Ms. Brooks, the lead said your selections are ready." I walked toward the mirror as they began to prepare the gown, silver sculpted radiant as though forged from moonlight and armor. Behind me, Harper stood speechless. For the first time in her life, she finally realized all this time she thought she'd been standing above me. But she was never even close. And tonight, when the ballroom lights rose, she'd see exactly how far she'd fall. The gown moved like liquid silver as I stepped into the grand foyer outside the Helios Tower ballroom, each crystal catching the light and scattering it across the marble like shattered stars. I could feel eyes turning toward me before I even began my descent. Soft gasps, murmured remarks, subtle shifts of posture as guests straightened, sensing something shifting in the room. The energy changed, subtle but unmistakable. For a moment, I stood at the top of the sweeping staircase, looking down at the crowd below. Investors, patrons, social climbers in glittering dresses and tailored suits, people who lived for spectacle, for privilege, for proximity to power. They didn't know yet that they were about to witness the implosion of the Harrington legacy. Tonight they were expecting an exclusive investment gala, a presentation by Marcus Harrington himself. They had no idea the real show had already begun. I placed a hand lightly on the railing, a gesture of composure, not need, and began my descent step by slow step. The whispers rippled up the staircase. Who is she? Is that one of the investors? That dress? She looks important. The word important followed me down like a shadow. Below, my family gathered near the entrance to the ballroom. My mother was adjusting her necklace, dazzling and overdone as always. My father was pacing, holding the leather presentation folder he believed contained the fraudulent blueprints and financial projections he planned to sell. Harper stood beside him, scowling, her earlier humiliation still fresh across her face. Harley looked bored, or pretending to be, but when his eyes drifted upward and found me on the stairs, his expression snapped into something sharper. Recognition, fear, understanding. My mother was the next to notice me. Her jaw dropped. Her eyes widened, then narrowed as if she were watching an imposter trespass into her spotlight. My father froze, mid-gesture, staring as if a ghost had materialized. And Harper, poor, furious, unraveling. Harper looked at me as though she couldn't comprehend how someone she thought so beneath her now towered effortlessly above her. The gown had been designed for moments like this. Silver chainmail and soft draping silk, each movement a whisper of wealth and war. Diamonds adorned my neck in cascading brilliance cold against my skin. Diamonds from the boutique vault, not borrowed, not rented, owned. When I reached the final step and stepped onto the marble floor, the crowd parted for me instinctively, the way water moves around something it cannot touch. I walked straight toward my family. Harper's lips curved into a sneer. "You think wearing a fancy dress makes you special?" I leaned in just close enough for only her to hear. "It makes me visible." She flinched, stepping back as if the words were a slap. My mother forced a brittle smile. "You must be confused about the dress code," she said tightly. "This is a business presentation, not whatever circus you're attempting." I kept my gaze steady. If it's a circus, then I'm overdressed. My father glared at me with the same rehearsed authority he'd used my entire life. "You do not belong here, Elena. You were not invited." "No," I said. "I wasn't." Before he could revel in what he thought was a victory, Mr. Henderson, one of the evening's top investors, approached with his wife. "Marcus," he said, clapping him on the shoulder, "is this the keynote speaker? She looks like the star of the night." My father's face paled. Harper's mouth fell open. Harley choked on his champagne. I smiled at Mr. Henderson. "Just a distant cousin," I said, letting the lie sit the way my father intended. "Here to observe." He laughed warmly. "Well, you'll surely elevate the photos tonight." He moved on, but the damage was done. My father's fingers tightened around his folder. "You need to leave," he hissed under his breath. "You're ruining everything." I reached out casually and touched the edge of the leather-bound presentation folder he held. Everything I asked softly. Or the scam you're about to commit. His face drained of color. Before he could pull the folder away, the headwaiter approached. "Mr. Harrington, sir," he said politely, "the ballroom is ready for your party to be seated." My father nodded stiffly. Guests streamed inside. Chandeliers glimmered overhead, sending prisms of light across the tables draped in white linen. Soft music played from a string quartet at the far end of the room. The atmosphere felt grand, elegant, full of expectation. I took my seat at the far end of the table, far from the podium, far from the head of the table, where my father would soon stand, but close enough to watch everything. The main course arrived. Guests talked among themselves, glasses of champagne catching the candlelight. Then, at the center of the table, Brad Harley lifted his champagne flute and tapped the glass with a spoon. The room quieted. He stood, posture tall, expression, polished voice smooth. "I propose a toast," he announced. My stomach tightened. "To the Harrington family," he continued, "and my parents beamed for their vision, their leadership, and their dedication to legacy." The guests applauded politely. But then Harley turned toward me, and to Elena he added, raising his glass higher. The applause faded. His smile sharpened. The Harringtons' greatest charity project. My mother laughed loudly, nodding in encouragement. My father smirked, proud. Harper's eyes gleamed with malice. I felt the room tighten, attention shifting, uncertainty stirring. Harley wasn't finished. To the girl who he said, pausing dramatically, "We once bailed out of county lockup for shoplifting cosmetics." A gasp rippled across the table. My chest tightened, but not from pain, from clarity. This wasn't humiliation, it was provocation. My mother touched her heart dramatically. "We tried so hard to help her," she sighed. "But you can only help someone so much." Mr. Henderson looked at me with disapproval. Harper smiled like she'd just won something. Harley lowered his glass and leaned back, satisfied. My father watched me like he was waiting for me to break. But the thing they were all waiting for, the collapse, the tears, the apology, didn't come. Instead, something inside me settled with terrifying stillness. I stood, slowly, deliberately. The silver gown whispered against the marble as I rose. I reached for my wine glass, not to drink it, but to raise it. And then, with one sharp movement, I slammed it against the table. The crystal shattered. Red wine splattered across the white linen like spilled blood. The entire ballroom froze. "Enough," I said, my voice slicing through the silence. My father's eyebrow twitched. My mother paled. Harley swallowed hard. Harper blinked in confusion. I scanned the table, then the room. "You have had every opportunity," I said, voice steady. "Every chance to stop, every chance to be better." My eyes locked onto my parents. "But you chose cruelty." Then to Harper. "You chose humiliation." Then to Harley. "You chose deception." And finally, I lifted the leather-bound folder from the side table beside me. My folder, the one I had switched with my father's. And tonight I said, holding it up, "You choose consequences." My father stood abruptly, face twisting. "Elena, sit down. Now." I ignored him and walked toward the stage as the lights above flickered. Right on cue. Mr. Archer had executed the signal. The chandeliers dimmed. Spotlights narrowed, and the entire ballroom went still. I climbed the steps to the podium and faced an audience of 500. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "I'd like to present something before my father does." I clicked the remote. The screen behind me lit up not with my father's fraudulent projections, but with the first page of the foreclosure documents for the Harrington estate. Gasps echoed around the room. My father lurched forward. "Turn that off," I pressed another button. Screenshots of unpaid debts appeared. Then falsified accounting records. Then wire transfer attempts. Then the audio file. Harley's voice filled the entire ballroom. "You have no idea what I'm dealing with. These people are idiots. Once the funds hit the offshore account tomorrow morning, I'm gone." Chaos erupted. Harper screamed. My mother collapsed backward into her chair. Harley surged forward, eyes wild, but security intercepted him before he reached the stage. I stood unmoving. untouchable, a silent storm in silver. Tonight I said the truth stands in your ballroom. And as the police began pouring into the room, as investors shouted, as everything my family had built crumbled, I finally felt something I had never felt among the Harringtons. Free. The ballroom erupted into chaos as soon as the recording ended, the sharp echo of Harley's confession still vibrating through the speakers, like a threat that refused to die. People were standing shouting over one another, chairs screeching backward across the marble, as investors demanded explanations, demanded refunds, demanded blood. My mother clutched the tablecloth with shaking hands, her face contorted in a mix of disbelief and horror. My father stood frozen in place, the presentation clicker hanging uselessly from his hand. Harper stared at her husband as though she didn't recognize him, tears streaking her makeup, her chest heaving with ragged, uneven breaths. And Harley looked like a man standing on the edge of a burning building, desperately scanning for an escape route that didn't exist. His chest rose and fell rapidly, sweat pooling along his hairline. When he saw security moving toward him, something in him snapped. He bolted. He shoved a chair out of his way and sprinted toward the side exit, pushing through startled guests. Security hesitated for half a second, just long enough for him to reach the door. But then Ray, the head of the security team, lunged forward with startling speed. "Stop!" Ray barked. But Harley didn't stop. I watched the scene unfold with eerie calm, as though time had slowed down thick and heavy. The chandeliers flickered overhead, the crowd parted instinctively, and Harley hurled himself toward the door. Ray intercepted him with the precision of a trained professional, seizing him by the arm and twisting until Harley's knees hit the floor. Harley let out a howl, a sound that didn't fit the polished veneer he'd worn all night. Security swarmed him. Harper screamed, Brad, what are you doing? Stop fighting, just stop!" But he wasn't listening. The desperation had consumed him. He was no longer the smooth-talking golden boy of the Harrington family. He was an animal, cornered, frantic, exposed, caught in the trap he had set for others. "Let me go!" he shouted, voice cracking. "You don't understand, I didn't do anything. This is all her." He pointed at me, spit flying from his lips. "She's framing me." The room gasped. People turned, eyes sharpened. I remained still. "You want to deny the recording?" I said quietly from the stage. He thrashed again, but Ray tightened his grip, forcing him still. "It was edited," Harley shouted. "She hacked the hotel system. She's obsessed with ruining us." His voice was shrill now, wild. He sounded like a man who had already lost everything but refused to accept the fall. I stepped down from the stage slowly, each movement controlled, deliberate. "Ray," I said softly. "Turn him around." Ray obeyed. Harley's eyes met mine, wide, frantic, full of childish rage. "You are losing your mind," he spat. "You'll go to prison for this. My lawyer." "Your lawyer," I cut in gently, "is currently being indicted for laundering funds for you through a shell company in the Caymans. The district attorney's office has been very busy today." His face blanched. I'd been waiting for that reaction. "Impossible," he whispered. You wouldn't." "You recorded your meetings on your cloud backup," I said simply. "Our cybersecurity team forwarded them." His mouth hung open, trembling. I let him sit with the truth, let him drown in it. Then I turned toward my family. My mother was still clutching the tablecloth, but when I approached, she looked away quickly as if my very presence burned her. My father's fists were clenched at his sides, the veins on his neck bulging, a silent volcano ready to erupt. Harper looked broken. Her mascara-streaked cheeks, her trembling lips, her glassy eyes. They were proof that the world she'd constructed for herself had collapsed in less than 10 minutes. She stared at Harley as though trying to reconcile the man she thought she married with the criminal currently being restrained on the ballroom floor. But there was no reconciling. Only truth. Only rubble. "Sit down," I told her gently. She swallowed hard. "Why? Why did you do this?" she whispered. "Why tonight? Why like this?" "Because the truth deserves witnesses," I said. She flinched. A commotion near the entrance drew the room's attention. The heavy oak doors slammed open, and a procession of uniformed police officers entered in formation, their expressions hard and prepared. "Atlanta Police," the lead officer announced over the roar of the room. "Nobody move." But the room was already still. A hush fell, unnatural, suffocating, as the officers walked toward the VIP table, where my parents sat tense and trembling. The lead officer approached my father. "Marcus Harrington," he said, voice echoing across the marble. "You are under arrest for bank fraud, wire fraud, and falsification of federal financial documents." My father staggered backward, almost knocking over his chair. "No," he muttered. "No, this is a mistake. I'm a businessman. This is a misunderstanding." But the officer spun him around and cuffed him swiftly. The click of metal echoed like a death knell. My mother let out a raw, animalistic scream. "No, no, 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 you can't do this." She lurched forward, reaching for my father as the officers restrained her. "We are the victims. This is a setup. All of this is her fault." She pointed at me with a trembling hand. Her accusation fell flat. No one looked at me. They only looked at her wild, disheveled unraveling. Another officer approached her. "Sylvia Harrington," he said with cold clarity, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and aiding in the falsification of financial records." She fought, but she was no match for trained officers. Her earrings caught in her hair, tearing as they forced her arms behind her back. "Let me go," she shrieked. "I'm her mother. She can't do this to us. But she was wrong. I wasn't doing this to them. Their actions had done it for me." Behind me, Harley was hauled to his feet, now flanked by 2 detectives. One of them read his charges. "Bradley Tucker, you are under arrest for insider trading, corporate espionage, and attempted embezzlement." He sagged. His legs gave out. The officers half carried, half dragged him toward the waiting hallway. As the trio, my father, my mother, and the man Harper married, were escorted from the ballroom, the guests parted like water, whispering in low, horrified voices. No one tried to stop the officers. No one defended the Harringtons. No one believed a word of their protests. It was over, almost. As the officers reached the doors, my mother twisted her body, forcing one last desperate scream across the ballroom. "Elena! Elena, tell them you're lying. Tell them to stop. We're your family." Her voice broke at the end, cracking open like something wounded. I walked forward, stopping 10 feet from the officers. My mother's tear-streaked face lifted toward me. Her eyes, once so cold and judgmental, now begged, pleaded, trembled. "Elena," she whispered softer now. "Please, you're my daughter." I felt the room hold its breath. I looked at her the way you look at an abandoned memory, detached, distant, no longer bleeding. "No," I said. She blinked. "You don't have a daughter named Elena," I continued quietly. "You made that choice a long time ago." And then I nodded to the officers. "Get them out of my hotel." Her scream followed them past the threshold, but it didn't follow me. I exhaled slowly, the weight of a lifetime lifting off my chest, as the doors slammed shut with a heavy final thud. Silence swallowed the room. The piano music had stopped. The investors stood frozen. The chandeliers glimmered overhead, casting fractured light across the ballroom floor. My gaze lowered to the center of that fractured light. Harper was sitting on the ground, knees bent, dress ruined, eyes unfocused, breath shallow. All the arrogance, all the superiority, all the glittering illusions she had wrapped herself in were gone. She looked small, alone, defeated. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel anger when I looked at her. I felt clarity. Her world had just ended. Mine was only beginning. The ballroom had emptied slowly, like a storm cloud dissolving after a violent downpour. The chandeliers still flickered, catching remnants of spilled champagne and abandoned napkins. Chairs sat crooked, conversations lay abandoned mid-sentence, and the air buzzed with the ghost of shocked whispers. The police had gone. The guests had fled. The echo of my mother's scream was fading from the marble. Now it was only me standing at the back of the ballroom watching a future I had once feared finally break open. My heels clicked softly as I crossed the room, each step steady, despite the weight of everything that had just unfolded. My breath was even. My pulse calm. It was strange how quiet justice could feel, how peaceful the world became, once the truth finally stood unchallenged. At the center of the ballroom, Sierra sat slumped against a toppled chair, her face hidden behind trembling hands. Her white gown was wrinkled, her hair falling from its pins, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the polished socialite she tried so hard to portray. She looked human. She looked young. She looked lost. I stopped a few feet away. For a long moment I said nothing, and neither did she. Finally, Sierra lifted her head. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed, glassy with disbelief. "What did you do?" she whispered. Her voice cracked around the words, breaking like thin porcelain. I didn't answer immediately. I allowed silence to settle between us like dust, heavy, honest, unavoidable. "What did I do?" I repeated. "Or what did they do?" Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. "That wasn't supposed to happen. Not like that. Not in front of everyone." "Truth rarely waits for permission," I said quietly. Sierra shook her head, covering her face with trembling fingers. "They're gone. All of them. My husband. My parents. My whole life just fell apart." I crouched down beside her, resting my palms on my thighs. "No," I said softly. "Your illusions fell apart. The truth is still here." She let out a choked sob. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what Brad was doing, or what Dad planned. I thought she broke off breath, struggling through panic. I thought they were helping people. I thought the gala was real. I really studied her for the first time in years. She wasn't cruel at her core. She was complicit. There was a difference. I reached into my evening purse and pulled out a sealed envelope, placing it gently in her lap. A small USB drive rested inside, visible through the translucent paper. "What's this?" she asked, voice shaking. "Proof," I replied. She blinked rapidly. "Of what that everything you believed was real wasn't." I softened the words the best I could. "Your husband's financial files, his offshore accounts, his messages with his partner." Sierra's face drained of color. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Her hands shook as she clutched the envelope. "He told me he promised. He said everything he did for us. He did it for himself," I said, my voice gentle but unyielding. "You were a tool, a pretty accessory to convince investors he was stable. But you were never part of his plan." Her lip trembled as another sob clawed its way out. The sound was raw, torn from something deep and bruised. I didn't comfort her. Not yet, not until she understood. "You asked what I did," I said. "I exposed the truth." Sierra stared at the USB in her hands for a long, trembling moment. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. "Why didn't you warn me?" My eyes drifted to the shattered crystal on the ground, the overturned champagne flutes, the remnants of a broken evening. "Would you have listened?" I asked. "Or would you have called it jealousy, revenge, bitterness?" She flinched. "I never had space in our family to speak without being mocked." I continued. "Every time I told you something was wrong, you told me I was overreacting. Dramatic, emotional, that father knew best, that mother knew best, that Brad loved you." Sierra covered her mouth, tears slipping through her fingers. "You weren't blind," I said. "You were choosing the version of the world that hurt you the least." She let out a soft, broken moan. "I didn't want to believe any of it. I didn't want to lose everything." "You didn't lose everything," I said quietly. "You lost what was never real." She rested her forehead against her knees. "What am I supposed to do now?" "You start over," I replied. "The same way I did." She let that sink in slowly. Her breathing steadied, though her eyes remained wet. After a long, aching silence, she lifted her head again. "Can you help me?" she whispered. I exhaled. The question wasn't unexpected, but it still struck something inside me. Something deep. Something old. I reached into my purse again and pulled out a second envelope, this one thicker, heavier. "What's this?" she asked, wiping her cheeks clumsily. "The invoice," I said, "for everything you and our family cost this hotel tonight." Her eyebrows knitted. How much I crouched lower, letting my voice drop to a quiet, measured tone. $70,000. The number landed like a punch. Sierra stared at me, shocked into silence. "Damages to the ballroom," I continued. "Security overtime, legal interventions, cancellation fees, staff hazard pay, emergency accounting audits, catering disposal." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "I settled the bill," I said. She blinked rapidly. Why would you do that for me? For the hotel," I corrected. "For the staff. For the people who deserve protection." She swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. "And what do I owe you $70,000? Her shoulders slumped. I can't pay that. I know," I said. She stared at me in confusion until she saw what I was holding in my other hand. A folded piece of fabric. A navy blue housekeeping uniform. Her eyes widened. "No?" she whispered. "You're kidding." "You start tomorrow morning at 7, I said calmly. "Mrs. Hampton will train you." "Housekeeping," she cried, voice cracking. "You want me to be a maid, I want you to learn value," I replied. "And gratitude, and humility, and work." Her breath trembled as she stared at the uniform. "That's cruel," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "Cruelty is letting you stay the person you were." She covered her face, shoulders shaking with fresh sobs. But when she spoke again, her voice was different, hoarse, wounded, but no longer defensive. "Will it help me pay the debt?" "Yes." "And when the debt is paid?" "What then?" I paused. "Then you and I talk again," I said. "As sisters. Not as enemies." Something in her expression loosened a thread pulled free from a tightly knotted rope. She nodded slowly, clutching the uniform to her chest. For the first time in a long time, Sierra didn't look entitled. She looked ready. I rose to my feet. "Come find me when you're done crying," I said gently. "There's one more thing you need to see before the night ends." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What?" "The place where our family finally ends," I said, turning toward the exit. "And where something better begins." Her breath hitched, but she followed. Because despite everything, despite the wreckage, the betrayal, the collapse, this wasn't just the end of the Harringtons. It was the beginning of Sierra's reckoning. And mine. The ballroom was silent when I returned, a strange, echoing stillness, settling over the wreckage of the night before. The light from the chandeliers had dimmed to a soft, golden haze, casting long shadows across overturned chairs and abandoned programs. It looked nothing like the glittering sanctuary it had been just hours ago. Now it resembled the aftermath of a battle, quiet, hollow, and heavy with the residue of truth. I stood just inside the doorway, letting the calm settle into my bones. The chaos was gone, the shouting gone, the police gone. What remained was the kind of silence that allowed everything inside you to catch up, every emotion you'd outrun, every memory you'd stuffed down, every bruise you never tended to. It was over. But the aftermath had only begun. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned slowly. It was Mr. Archer. He approached with the composed, respectful stride of a man who had weathered storms far worse than tonight's. But something in his posture, slightly softened, slightly humbled, told me this one had shaken even him. "Ms. Brooks," he said quietly, "I've finalized all incident reports. The legal department confirms the hotel is fully protected. None of the Harrington liabilities can touch Helios Tower or your ownership." I nodded once, letting relief filter through me in slow, careful breaths. "What about the staff?" I asked. "No one was harmed during the arrests." "Only shaken," he replied. "But your intervention with Mrs. Lively earlier today, it meant more to them than you realize." A gentle pause. "Then you were extraordinary tonight." I didn't respond. Praise still sat strangely on my shoulders, as though it belonged to someone else, someone stronger, someone whole. Mr. Archer hesitated, then stepped closer. "You should know," he said softly. Several staff members asked if they could thank you personally. One server said she'd worked here for 12 years and never once felt seen by ownership until now. My throat tightened. I stared at the ballroom floor, tracing the faint reflection of the chandeliers on the polished marble. Maybe someday, I murmured, but not tonight. He nodded with understanding. "Your privacy is already being handled," he said. "Security is discreetly correcting any whispers about your identity. No one outside this hotel will hear a version of tonight's events that you did not authorize." Another nod. "Thank you, Archer." He bowed his head slightly, then excused himself, leaving me alone once more in the hollowed-out grandeur of the ballroom. I moved deeper into the room, running my fingers along the back of a chair that had been knocked over during the chaos. A reminder of what broken power looked like. But as I surveyed the damage, a voice drifted from behind me. "You really did it." I turned. Sierra stood in the doorway, changed out of her ruined gown into simple hotel loungewear sweatpants, an oversized t-shirt, hair pulled back into a messy bun. She looked small, stripped of vanity and armor. But her eyes were clearer than they'd been in years. She stepped toward me cautiously, as though approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "I didn't think you would," she said. "I didn't think you had it in you." "I didn't," I replied. "Not before." She stopped in front of me, her gaze sweeping the room, absorbing the destruction. Her voice wavered. "Harley, Mom, Dad, all gone, just like that. They made choices," I said. "Tonight those choices met consequences." Sierra let out a shaky breath. Do you think they'll go to prison?" "Yes." She flinched. We stood in silence for several seconds, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on both of us. Then she whispered, "What happens to us now?" "You tell me," I said. Her head snapped toward me. You asked for help," I reminded her. "I'm offering it, but I won't drag you anywhere you don't choose to go." She swallowed hard. "I don't know where to go." "You start where everyone starts," I said, "with the truth." She lowered her gaze to her hands. "I don't think I know who I am without them." "You're about to learn." She blinked back another wave of tears. "And what about you? Do you feel free now?" I let the question sit inside me for a moment, letting it echo, letting it roll through old rooms in my mind, where younger versions of myself still hid, terrified and small. "Freedom isn't a moment," I finally said. "It's a choice you make over and over again." Sierra studied me like she was seeing me for the first time, not the sister she mocked, not the daughter she dismissed, not the shadow she ignored. The woman standing in front of her. "Are you going to disappear again?" she asked. "No." "Then what are you going to do? Rebuild?" Her breath caught. "Our house. Our lives," I corrected gently. Just then, Archer reappeared at the doorway. "Ms. Brooks, he said there's something you should see downstairs." "What is it?" "A foreclosure notification just went public. The Harrington estate auction is scheduled for 9:30 this morning." I exhaled once, slow and measured. "Make preparations," I said. "For what?" I met his gaze. "To buy it." Sierra's eyes widened. "You're buying our house?" "Not a house," I said. "A symbol." Her breath trembled. "Let me come with you." I stared at her, searching her face. "Why?" She swallowed hard before answering. "Because I want to see where the lies started. And where they end." I nodded. "Get your coat," I said. "It's going to be a long morning." The drive to the foreclosure office was quiet, the early morning sunlight cutting through the tinted windows like a knife. Sierra stared out at the passing city, lost in whatever memories clung to her like old perfume. When we arrived, the room was already full: investors, brokers, curious onlookers. The Harrington name still drew attention even in disgrace. Sierra hovered behind me, small and pale. When the auctioneer called for opening bids, silence fell. Opening at 1 million. A murmur rippled through the room. I raised my paddle. 1,000,000, I said calmly. No one challenged me. Not one person in that crowded room wanted to touch the Harrington curse. Sold, the auctioneer declared. Just like that, the house that once exiled me became mine. Sierra let out a fragile, broken sound, half shock, half grief. She pressed her trembling fingers to her lips. I didn't touch her. Not yet. We drove to the estate in silence. The gates creaked open with mechanical reluctance, revealing the once manicured grounds now beginning to wither. The house loomed like a ghost of my childhood, tall, cold, heavy with memories that had never belonged to me. Sierra stood beside me at the foot of the walkway. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Yes, I said. You can. We walked inside together. Every room we passed felt like peeling old wounds, open echoes of shouting slammed doors, cruel remarks. But with each step the house seemed smaller, less powerful, less capable of hurting either of us. When we reached the living room, I turned to her. This house has held you hostage, I said. Held both of us hostage. But today... I gestured around us at the empty walls, the fading paint, the old curtains. We let it go. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely now. What are you going to do with it? She whispered. I didn't hesitate. Demolish it. She looked up sharply. What this house raised broken people, I said. The land deserves something better. She stared at me for a long, aching moment. Like what I pictured, the blueprints, the architectural designs, the sketches I hadn't shown anyone yet. A home for girls who grew up the way we did, I said, but who shouldn't have to become what we became. Her tears fell harder. Elena, that's beautiful. No, I said, it's necessary. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Sierra whispered, Can I help? I turned to look at her fully. Yes, I said softly, but first, you have to become someone who can. She nodded slowly, pressing the housekeeping uniform she still carried closer to her chest. I will, she said. I promise. And for the first time in our entire lives, I believed her. As we stepped out of the house and back into the sunlight, I felt something inside me finally loosen. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't triumph. This was reclamation. And it was only the beginning. The grand opening of the Aurora Haven Center began under a sky streaked with gold, the sunrise washing the glass-paneled building in soft, radiant light. A gentle breeze rolled across the courtyard, carrying the scent of fresh lavender from the garden beds the girls had planted themselves. Volunteers bustled around the entrance, adjusting banners, arranging welcome kits, laughing softly as their excitement built. I stood at the heart of the courtyard, hands clasped loosely in front of me, watching a dream that once lived only in the quiet corners of my mind finally take shape. The grounds where the Harrington estate once stood no longer felt haunted, no longer cold, no longer stained with fear or secrets. The new building rose with wide-open windows, warm wood accents, and walking paths lined with sunflowers, strong, bright, unapologetic sunflowers. It was nothing like the house that had stood here before. It wasn't supposed to be. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. I turned and saw Sierra standing a few steps away, dressed in her housekeeping uniform. Not because she had to wear it today, but because she insisted. She said it reminded her of who she was becoming, not who she had been. You ready? She asked, her voice soft but steady. More than ever, I replied. She smiled, a small, real one, the kind she hadn't known how to make when she lived inside the gilded cage of our parents' illusions. The first girls began to arrive, 9 of them ranging from 15 to 19. They stepped onto the courtyard cautiously, their eyes darting around with that familiar blend of hope and fear. Some clutched trash bags, filled with everything they owned. Others walked empty-handed, shoulders tight, and braced for disappointment. I recognized all of it, because I once arrived in the world the same way. A tall girl with cropped brown hair paused a few feet in front of me, her jaw clenched, her fists stuffed into her pockets. Is this really for us? She asked. Yes, I said gently. Her eyes narrowed. And you're not going to kick us out if we mess up, no. And you're not going to make us earn your kindness. Not my kindness, I replied. But your future, yes. But you won't be earning it alone. Another girl stepped forward, a small one with trembling hands. What if... She swallowed hard. What if we don't know how to start over? I moved closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Then we begin where you are, I said. Not where you think you should be. Her chin quivered, and before she could stop herself, tears spilled over. Sierra approached, then offering the girl a tissue. Come on, she said softly. Let me show you the garden. I planted the first seeds wrong twice, so trust me, you're not alone. The girl let out a shaky laugh and followed her. Mr. Archer arrived next, carrying several folders tucked neatly under his arm. His suit was immaculate as always, but today something softer undercut his usual formality. He surveyed the courtyard, his expression balanced between admiration and quiet pride. Ms. Brooks, he said, nodding politely. The board sends their congratulations. They also requested a full report on the center's launch, but I told them it could wait until after the event. For once I teased, you're the one delaying a report. He allowed himself a rare smile. This place is more important. He handed me a folder. Inside were the final approval papers, the official confirmation that the Aurora Haven Center had been granted state-funding private sponsorship support and a permanent partnership with the city's youth housing program. Everything was in place. Everything was real. Thank you, Archer, I said. I couldn't have done this without you. You did the impossible, he replied. I only stood beside you while you moved mountains. A voice called out from behind us. All right, ladies and gentlemen, gather around. One of the volunteers ushered everyone toward the ribbon stretched across the entrance. The crowd was small, a few donors, a handful of staff, the new residents, and the people who had witnessed the unraveling and rebuilding of this legacy. A long silver ribbon shimmered in the sunlight. I took the ceremonial scissors from the volunteer's hand. Sierra stepped beside me. Archer stood on my other side. The girls formed a semicircle around us, some fidgeting, some whispering, some clasping their hands, as though afraid the moment might slip away. I raised the scissors. But before I cut, I spoke. Today, I said, my voice carrying across the courtyard, we turn pain into purpose. We turn endings into beginnings, and we turn a place of fear into a home built on love, respect, and possibility. The girls straightened. Sierra wiped her eyes. And to every one of you standing here, I continued, you are not broken. You are not burdens. You are not mistakes. You are survivors, and you deserve to rise. I cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted into applause. The girls stepped inside first, their eyes wide as they explored the warm hallways filled with sunlight murals painted by volunteers and bedrooms designed to feel like sanctuary instead of punishment. Staff guided them toward the welcome area, laughter beginning to bloom where silence had once lived. Sierra lingered beside me. You did this, she whispered. We did this, I corrected. She hesitated before asking a question that felt like the final test of the woman she was becoming. Will you ever forgive them? The wind stirred the ribbon fragments at our feet. I looked out at the garden newly planted and full of potential. I don't need to forgive them, I said softly. I just need to let them go. She nodded slowly, absorbing the truth not as an order, but as an invitation. We stood there together, watching a life begin in a place where another life had ended. Later that afternoon, after the girls had settled into their new rooms and volunteers had finished their tours, I walked alone through the garden. Butterflies hovered over the lavender. A fountain trickled gently at the center. Sunlight danced across the stones. My phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen. Blocked number Elena. Please, it's Mom. I need money, just a little. Answer me, please. I stared at it for a moment, not with anger, not with longing, just with quiet clarity. Then I deleted it. No hesitation, no ache, just release. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and continued walking among the flowers, feeling the weight of the past lift with every step. A soft breeze brushed against my cheek, warm and steady. A new beginning, a real one. And maybe for the first time I felt entirely, solidly, beautifully whole. If you've ever rebuilt yourself from the ground up, or if you've ever been told you didn't belong only to prove you did, I'd love to hear your story. Share your experience in the comments, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of strength, justice, and rising above the past.